Good afternoon. The next item of business is portfolio questions. The usual, short questions, please, and snappy answers would be very helpful. The group, questions 4 and 5 are grouped together, so you know. I take those questions first, the supplementaries, then I take any supplementary to those two. So the first question, Gail Ross, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government when the electronic signage will be installed along the A9 north of Inverness.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Matheson.
Transport Scotland has 4 existing variable message signs on the A9 north of Inverness. 2 of these cover the approach south towards the Keswick Bridge, 1 northbound approaching Helmsdale and the 4th southbound beside Georgemas Junction railway station. As part of the National High Winds Management Strategy, Transport Scotland will be installing an initial phase of 4 additional variable message signs to cover the approaches to both the Dornochfirth and the Cromarty Firth bridges. These are planned for installation in spring 2020.
Gail Ross.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. The SNP have committed to upgrading this lifeline road with the improvements which are well underway at Berriedale, with the new road due to open this spring. But can I ask the Cabinet Secretary if the Scottish Government will commit to further improvements to ensure other notorious sections of the A9, such as Tomach Junction, Tane and the Cambus Abbey Bends, are safe and fit for the 21st century?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, safety of the trunk road network is assessed on an annual basis and programmes of interventions are developed and delivered at those locations where it's expected that they could benefit, and there is evidence to support investment to improve safety at particular key aspects of the trunk road network. As part of that programme, work is presently ongoing at Tane to improve junctions on the bypass, and these proposals are the subject of ongoing stakeholder engagement within the area. I can also say to the member that given that we've now published the National Transport Strategy and are now working to complete the second Strategic Transport Projects Review, the A9 north of Inverness is part of the consideration within the STPR2 process. That process will determine governments and priorities in future transport investments, including in the northern aspects of the A9.
Jamie Halcrow-Jones.
Thank you. I met with electric vehicle users in Orkney on Monday, and they raised concerns about the lack of charging points on the A9. There's also concern that these were often single use points and unavailable due to either being used by other drivers or in some cases being broken. So could the Cabinet Secretary tell me, with infrastructure so essential, what the plans are to improve the availability of electric vehicle charging points, particularly in remote and rural areas, as found across my region?
Oh, a little wide of the mark, but Cabinet Secretary, you look ready to answer.
I don't know if we've got any electronic signage for charging points, Presiding Officer, but what I can say is that we have a very extensive car charging network across Scotland. The member may recognise that Scotland has got the most extensive public charging network in the UK, with the exception of central London. And we're building on that yet further to make sure that we increase the level of charging points which are available for low emission and for electric vehicles. That includes the work we're taking forward with local authority partners, including Highland, Orkney, Shetland, Western Isles and other local authorities across the country through the very substantial investment we're making in to help to support people in moving to low carbon vehicles and to electric vehicles.
Question 2, Oliver Mundell.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what action it is taking to improve road safety around schools and rural areas.
Cabinet Secretary.
The Scottish Government is committed to achieving safer road travel in Scotland for all, including around schools. It provides funding to local authorities to create new or improved infrastructure, which includes around schools through the Places for Everyone programme. Transport Scotland also fund Cycling Scotland to deliver bikeability training available to all schools. Additionally, Road Safety Scotland has developed online learning resources for 3 to 18-year-olds, particularly useful for school teachers. In accordance with their statutory responsibility for local roads, it is for local authorities to consider the most appropriate measures to safeguard school children within their area.
Oliver Mundell.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. Like local parents, I'm concerned that Dumfries and Galway Council is systematically ignoring its obligations in relation to rural schools. At Duncow Primary, there have been broken flashing signs for years on a 60-mile-per-hour road, and at Hotsbridge Primary School, large volumes of quarry traffic are being forced to drive past the school daily as a result of a long-term road closure. Will the Cabinet Secretary ask transport officials to approach the local authority to see what more can be done to support them in order to ensure that we don't see a very serious accident?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I'm more than happy to ask my road safety colleagues in Transport Scotland to contact the local authority on these matters, but he is right to highlight the safety issues which are associated with this, but what that doesn't do is it doesn't remove the statutory responsibility in the local authority to take the appropriate measures, and I would encourage the member to make sure that he continues to press the local authority and its executive leaders to make sure that they are taking forward the appropriate measures to ensure that they address the safety issues that the member has concerns over.
Question 3, Claudia Beamish.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on reported rural bus route reductions in South Scotland.
Cabinet Secretary.
We recognise the vital importance that bus services have for millions of Scots across the country, especially those who, for whatever reason, do not have access to car or live in places which are not served by the rail network. Bus usage has been declining across the country over many decades. Rural areas present distinct challenges for delivering viable local bus services. Local authorities and regional transport partners already have powers to secure additional services to meet local needs, and we are extending the range of options available to them through the Transport Scotland Act, which received royal assent towards the end of last year.
2 members of supplementaries, Joe McAlpine followed by Finlay Carson. I'm asking you both. Oh, I've not asked you. Oh, Claudia Beamish, that was disgraceful of me. Please, ask your supplementary.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I don't know about disgraceful, but thanks for letting me in. Since the start of December, around 4% of services on Stagecoach's 1012 service, which runs from Dumfries through to Edinburgh, have been delayed due to mechanical and operational issues. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary what can be done to ensure there's a robust regulation so that where rural bus services are timetabled, they're provided unless there are exceptional circumstances out with the operator's control? And will he consider extending the parameters covered by bus regulation to include reasonable levels of comfort, such as adequate temperature control and sufficient seating and adequate shelter at bus stops?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the member's raising an issue which is largely an operational matter for Stagecoach themselves in terms of the mechanical nature of the fleet which they're using. Of course, that needs to comply with the regulations which are set down by the Commissioner, and it may be the very issue that the member has concerns around is an issue that could be addressed by the Commissioner. She could go to Bus Users Scotland, which we fund, that helps to support people who have got concerns and issues around bus services, but the actual practical operation of the buses themselves is a matter for the operator, but she could address some of these issues through the Commissioner, who may be able to assist in addressing some of these concerns.
And surprise, I now call Joe McAlpine, followed by Finlay Carson. Both briefly, please. Supplementaries.
Thank you. I welcome the £83 million investment in this budget to the Future Transport Fund, which can the Cabinet Secretary outline how local authorities will be able to apply for and make use of this funding?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, the Future Transport Fund is a fund of some £83 million as set out in the draft budget. It's there to support a range of low-carbon programmes and projects. This includes initiatives to support the deployment of zero-emission buses, such as in order to help to support the transition to zero-emission buses on local routes. The programme for government also set out our commitment to take forward a Scottish ultra-low emission bus scheme. That scheme is presently open for applications, and bids can be made between now and the 27th of February, again to help to support the industry moving to low-carbon buses. The fund will also support the development of cycling infrastructure through the Places for Everyone programme, which is administered by Sustrans, and improved bus priority infrastructure. Of cycling infrastructure through the Places for Everyone programme, which is administered by Sustrans, and improved bus priority infrastructure, which we're considering for in their area. So it's a fund that covers a number of different areas, and local authorities and other organisations can contact Transport Scotland in order to look at making applications to the various aspects of it.
Finlay Carson.
Can the Cabinet Secretary outline what discussions, if any, he's had with Dumfries and Galloway Council with regards to establishing a local bus service franchise, and what support the Scottish Government can provide local authorities if it's their intention to improve rural bus services in that manner?
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, any intention for Dumfries and Galloway to look at establishing a franchise would be a matter for elected members within Dumfries and Galloway Council. Transport Scotland officials can give them advice in relation to the legislation which we now have in place in this, but it would be a matter for the Council directly to take forward.
Question 4, Daniel Johnson.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it has reviewed its transport procurement processes and criteria in light of recent issues relating to ferry contracts.
Minister Paul Wheelhouse.
The Scottish Government continually reviews its procurement processes and levels of governance for major infrastructure and vessel investment projects.
Daniel Johnson.
Thank the Minister for that answer, but the ferries being procured through Ferguson raise serious questions regarding oversight and governance. We need answers from the Government on why they decided to build 2 dual-fuel ferries that CalMac apparently didn't want, the questions around the propulsion systems and whether they're appropriate for the distance of the routes, and with the design specification that wasn't properly signed off. Either the procurement process was deficient or it wasn't followed. Which does the Minister think it is? Minister.
Well, Mr Johnson is obviously trying to get in ahead of the committee inquiry, which I am pleased to be taking part in, and unfortunately the date for my appearance has been moved back by the committee, but I will look to answer all of these matters that are raised with me at the appropriate time. But I would say to him that I don't agree with his assertions around the design of the vessels. We believe the vessels are good design for the services they will provide. Clearly we are trying to move to decarbonise the fleet, and the dual fuel propulsion systems are one means of doing that. We are looking forward as we develop our future ferries plan and indeed the VRDP as we go forward to try and make sure we take full account of the need to decarbonise ferry travel for the passengers and indeed vehicles. And indeed we are, in terms of the procurement, I would just remind him that we are supporting a very important business in Inverclyde, and I hope I appreciate his party are supportive of that, but I hope he do recognise that in awarding the work to the yard, a good yard, that we will see good vessels ultimately delivered, and notwithstanding the challenges we've had with the previous management.
Question 5, Jeremy Balfour.
The Scottish Government, what its response is to the Competition and Markets Authority's analysis of its handlings of ferry contracts and the potential effect it has on future procurement.
Minister.
The Competition and Market Authority's paper is not an analysis of our handling of ferry contracts, but rather notes its view around competition in future procurement of vessels.
Jeremy Balfour.
I'm sure we can all agree on the importance of securing Scotland's shipbuilding industry, but does the Minister also agree that the disastrous SNP mismanagement, like we've seen at Ferguson's, is not a sustainable way to do this?
Minister.
I'm glad that Mr Balfour is not a member of the judiciary, because it's usually customary to hear the evidence from witnesses at an inquiry before coming to conclusions. As I've said in response to Mr Johnson, we fundamentally disagree with that assessment of the situation, and I'm prepared, as my colleagues are, to defend our position when we come before the inquiry that the committee is holding, and will respect the results that come from that inquiry. But I would say to him that not all his colleagues have previously expressed support for shipbuilding in Inverclyde. Not all his colleagues have previously agreed with that position. I'm glad to see that there's some sign the Conservative Party is perhaps beginning to support the shipbuilding industry after decades of neglect.
Stuart McMillan, followed by Liam MacArthur.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. The Law Society of Scotland stated the importance has to be placed not only on the financial and the commercial matters, but also on ensuring that the procurement takes, and I quote, takes full account of other relevant considerations. Can the Minister give an indication of some of the wider benefits of the recent issues relating to ferry contracts will have on the 300 jobs and the local economy in my constituency that the shipyard supports going forward?
Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As Mr McMillan will know, because I know he's been closely engaged throughout the process since 2014, our efforts saved Ferguson Marine from closure. We rescued more than 300 jobs, as he says, ensured that the 2 vessels under construction will be completed, and secured a future for the yard. The alternative was for us, a very unpalatable alternative, was for us to walk away, and we were not prepared to do that. In addition to the jobs in the yard, stepping in to save the yard also supports the jobs in the supply chain locally and further afield, including local businesses and suppliers who depend on the business from the yard and its workers. And we've also seen suggestions in the last few weeks, including at the committee sessions that referenced earlier, that vessels should be built in both China and South Korea. While I indeed respect the individuals who've made those points, I'm They are entitled to their view. We believe that betrays a staggering lack of commitment to the workforce and local community in Inverclyde. And I can assure Mr Macmillan, who represents his community with great passion, that we are absolutely behind the people of Inverclyde.
Liam MacArthur.
Thanks very much. As part of any review of procurement and indeed the government's ferries plan, will the Minister also agree to a specific time frame with Orkney Islands Council for the procurement of the replacement vessels that are now urgently needed to operate on Orkney's internal lifeline route?
Minister.
Well, Presiding Officer, I recognise Mr MacArthur's strong interest in this issue as the constituency member for Orkney. He will know that currently those services are provided by Orkney Islands Council. I will undertake to have continued discussion with Orkney Islands Council, of course, as we move forward. But at this moment in time, our focus is obviously on the immediate issues in front of us in terms of developing the vessel replacement and deployment plan for our supported ferries, and indeed the ferries plan, the Futures Ferries plan, the next period, and supporting the workforce at Inverclyde to ensure we maintain employment there, as I've referenced in response to Mr Macmillan, and ensuring we deliver Hulls 801 and 802 as soon as is possible, and to deliver the vital services they need to provide to communities in the Clyde and Hebrides.
Question 6, Gillian Martin.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government whether it provide an update on the progress of the Scottish 4G infill programme in Aberdeenshire. Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. We are making good progress with 4G mobile infill programme. There are 13 masts built or under construction, and I'm pleased to be able to advise Parliament that today the mast at New Luce in Galloway went live last weekend. Unfortunately, progress has been slower at 2 candidate sites identified in Aberdeenshire, at Pennon and Colliston, with no confirmed interest yet expressed by mobile network operators. But I can assure Ms Martin that I and Scottish Government officials will continue to use every opportunity to secure mobile operators' interest in these and other candidate sites.
Gillian Martin.
I thank the Minister for that answer. It's largely answered my supplementary question, which was about Colston, because the recent information that I had was that there was no interest in operators. I mean, can I ask what can be done to encourage operators to get involved in this process and to give us the coverage that we so desperately need? Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Certainly in response to the point that Ms Martin makes, it would be wrong to say there's no interest whatsoever. We haven't had confirmed interest in taking on the mast at Colliston, but it's important to recognise there is a fundamental principle of the Scottish 4G infill programme that unless we have at least one operator committed to deliver 4G services from any candidate site, that site will not progress to build. But at Colliston, I can reiterate, we are in discussion with an operator who's expressed interest in the site, not yet confirmed interest, and we are pressing for their commitment to using this site. And if the programme can achieve this, the site will progress to build. So we will publish updates to the programme on our website, and I will write to Ms Martin with a further update on Colliston when this is available, and of course welcome interest from other colleagues in sites across the Chamber who they have an interest in the Scottish 4G infill programme in their own areas.
Question 7, Joanne Lamont.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government, in light of the River Clyde bursting its banks, what impact and risk assessment it has made of Glasgow's flood defences?
I don't think that was the question as written, but Cabinet Secretary.
So it's not the question which is before me.
No, sorry, I thought... sorry, Ms Lamont. Can you ask your question on the business bulletin?
My apologies, I think I've got my weeks mixed up.
Yes.
And no doubt there'll be some investigation. I'll not explain my own justification for it, but anyway, to ask the Scottish Government what its response is to the Get Glasgow Moving petition calling for publicly owned buses.
Now that's a wee bit different, Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, flood prevention in Glasgow, no. We welcome the Get Glasgow Moving commitment to improving public transport in Glasgow. The Transport Scotland Act 2019 provides a range of new tools that local transport authorities can use to meet local needs and circumstances where they wish to pursue partnership working with local bus service providers, local franchising or running their own bus services. Alongside the Act, we are bringing forward transformational long-term funding for bus priority infrastructure of over £500 million.
Joanne Lamont.
Can I thank that Minister, the Cabinet Secretary for that response? Given the earlier mix-up in my questions, can I just ask that the Cabinet Secretary would consider looking carefully at how they might encourage communities to develop cooperative models to provide local bus services. There are a number of campaigns, notably amongst the Cooperative Party and others, where they recognise that a cooperative model may provide a very effective means of bringing transport, bus transport to local communities. And I would wonder if the Cabinet Secretary would make a commitment to look at that further.
Cabinet Secretary.
Presiding Officer, I'd be more than happy to look at that issue, which I think is a very interesting concept around providing local bus services. I think there are, particularly in rural areas, there is a potential for cooperative models as being one of the means by which bus services could be provided. But if Joanne Lamont wants to provide me with further information, specifically on the proposals which she believes that are worth considering, I'd be more than happy to engage with her and to look at these in further detail.
Thank you. That concludes questions on transport infrastructure, and I apologise for Annie Wells for failing to reach it. I move straight on to questions on justice and law officers. Question 1, Alistair Allen.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how the justice system provides support to victims of serious crime and keeps them informed at every stage of the process.
Cabinet Secretary Hamza Youssef.
I welcome the member's question, particularly as this is Victims Awareness Week. The Victims Code sets out victims' rights to information. Victims of serious crime will be allocated a family liaison officer by Police Scotland to update them during the police investigation. If this leads to criminal charges, victims can also access support from the Victim Information Advice Service at the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. Following a conviction, information on prisoners is available through the Victim Notification Scheme. Support is available via Victim Support Scotland, including their support for families bereaved by crime service, and via the National Advocacy Project for Victims of Sexual Violence. The Victims Task Force is also considering ways to improve support and information.
Alistair Allen.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. How does the Scottish Government ensure that victims of crime, especially the most serious crimes, have suitable emotional support and receive practical information, specifically about their rights to make representations to a parole board?
Cabinet Secretary.
It's a hugely important area and a really important question. I thank the member for raising it. He'll be aware, of course, that we recently had a consultation on parole, and the analysis and response that came back from that has been extremely welcome. We're looking very actively around the support that Victim Support Scotland can provide, and already does, but can provide further in terms of emotional and practical support when making written or oral representations to the parole board. But on the back of the consultation that we brought forward, we're looking at how victims can perhaps even attend parole board hearings, and of course a key part of that that will be to ensure that they have welfare support, emotional support, very much as part of that. So there is a Transforming Parole Implementation Group that is taking that work forward. The group has met once on the 28th of January. They're due to meet again next week. I'm happy to keep the member informed of the progress as that work develops.
Liam McCarthy.
Thanks very much. A key feature of the Victims and Witnesses Act passed by this Parliament in 2013 were police restitution orders. These would help finance an expansion of the support officers receive following an assault in the line of duty. To date, there's no sign of those orders being implemented, so could I ask the Cabinet Secretary why the delay and when we could expect these orders to be brought forward?
Cabinet Secretary.
There has been good progress on restitution orders. I'll write to the member in more detail. Some of that delay was coming, as he probably knows, from some conversations that we had to have with the UK government, but they've been constructive conversations, I should add. So, I certainly made a commitment when I first came into this role that I would like to bring forward restitution orders, and it was certainly an ask that came from the Scottish Police Federation. There has been some significant progress, and I'll write to the member with more details on that.
Questions 2 has been withdrawn for an obvious reason. Question 3, Liz Smith.
To ask the Scottish Government whether it will provide an update on the introduction of transdermal alcohol monitoring tags.
Cabinet Secretary.
Last year, through the Management of Offenders Act 2019, the Scottish Government introduced a legislative framework to enable the expansion of electronic monitoring, including deployment of new technologies for remote substance monitoring. In October 2019, following a procurement exercise, we announced a new electronic monitoring contract, which will commence on the 1st of April this year, and it will include those technological capabilities. While the provisions of the Act that enable remote substance monitoring have not yet been commenced, the next steps will be to work closely with justice stakeholders to discuss how this enhanced monitoring may be most effectively used in the future.
Liz Smith.
Thank you for the Cabinet Secretary, an interesting answer that you've just provided. The Cabinet Secretary will know that recent evaluations from 2 separate UK pilots, the first one in Humberside, Lincolnshire and North Yorkshire, and the second one in London saw a combined total of more than 1,400 offenders subject to compulsory sobriety when monitoring took place with alcohol tags, and these both yielded a 94% compliance rate. Does the Cabinet Secretary agree that continuous alcohol monitoring tags could play an important part in ensuring that we are tackling alcohol-fuelled crime here in Scotland?
Cabinet Secretary.
I certainly think that the pilots that have been taking place in England and Wales are certainly worth exploring. I definitely think that the technologies that we're discussing can absolutely play a role. I welcomed at the time I saw a comment from her Justice spokesperson, Liam Kerr, being positive about these technologies. So we absolutely think it's a role to play, that there's a role to play. What I would guard against, and I know Liz Smith certainly isn't suggesting this, is there will not be one silver bullet to tackle this issue. Clearly we'll want to work very closely with those individuals that are suffering from alcohol and substance abuse, working on the preventative agenda where we can, but certainly transdermal technologies absolutely could play a role in that. We're working very closely with partners up here in Scotland, but also looking at what the pilots are demonstrating in England and Wales. And I thank her and her party for keeping an open mind to these technologies in the future.
Question 4, Willie Coffey.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government whether it is considering granting a right of access for children to their grandparents in cases of family separation.
Minister Ashdenham.
The Scottish Government recognises the important role that grandparents play in many families in relation to bringing up children. The important role that grandparents play in many families in relation to bringing up children. We've not included a specific provision in the Children's Scotland provision could cut across the key principle in the legislation that the welfare of the child is the court's paramount consideration.
Willie Coffey.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? She will be aware of the UN Convention that sets out the fundamental rights of a child, including the right to live with a family that loves and cares for them. Would the Minister give consideration to enshrining this basic right within our own legislation as we take forward our Children's Scotland Bill, so that the onus on anyone seeking to deny children that basic right should themselves be required to seek a court order to do so?
Minister. Currently, a grandparent can apply for a contact order. That's under Section 11 of the Children's Scotland Act of 1995. And in making a decision, the welfare of the child will be the court's paramount consideration, taking into account the views expressed by a child. The bill would require the court, when considering the welfare of the child, to take account of the effect of its decision on the child's important non-parental relationships, which could, of course, include grandparents. And my view is that the present position complies with the UNCRC.
2 supplementaries, Alec Cole-Hamilton, followed by Jeremy Balfour. Briefly, please.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'm grateful to the Minister for the time she took to meet Gordon and Chonenbury Mason, my constituents, who, after involuntary estrangement from their grandson, have been campaigning on this issue. They recognise the problems that the Minister has outlined about extending a right to grandparents. But does the Minister agree that the French model of giving children the right to have connections with their ancestors, where it is appropriate and in their welfare to do so, is a way forward here?
Minister.
I thank the member for raising that, and obviously he's made mention of the fact that I have met with him and his constituents to explore this issue with them. And we want to ensure that children can expect to know and to maintain contact with their wider family, and of course that is except in very exceptional circumstances. However, I don't consider that an automatic right of contact, such as the member is describing, is appropriate for a number of reasons, including that it may not be in the child's best interest in every case. And it could, as I said in my earlier answer, cut across the key principle of the 1995 Act, which the welfare of the child is the paramount consideration. Grandparents can, of course, apply to the court for contact under the existing legislation, and a decision will then be made by the court about what is in the child's best interest in that particular case.
Jeremy Balfour.
Can I thank the Minister for her answers? Like other members, I've had a number of constituents contact me about this issue. As you will be aware, in other jurisdictions across the world, there is a presumption that the grandparents would have that right, not an automatic right, but a presumption. Would you look at that for the bill to give at least the presumption that grandparents would have a right to see their grandchildren, while also recognising that it must be the best interest of the child for that to take place?
Minister.
Yeah, I think the presumption is obviously one area that we have already looked at in the passage of the bill. It's a very complex area. The presumption was strongly supported, as you might expect, by organisations such as Grandparents Apart UK. But however, also as you might expect, there was considerable opposition to those and concerns that were raised that any provision, again, would cut across the key principle in the legislation about the welfare of the child being taken into account. So we consider that the arguments against this specific provision in the law are stronger than the arguments for making the provision in the bill.
Question 5, James Kelly, please.
Thank you. To ask the Scottish Government what progress has been made in implementing the provisions of the Management of Offenders Scotland Act 2019.
Cabinet Secretary.
The 2019 Act covers 4 distinct topics: electronic monitoring, disclosure, the parole board and the control of release from prisons, including home detention curfew. There have been, to date, 3 commencement regulations bringing in different aspects of the Act. In October 2019, an initial commencement regulation brought into force a number of provisions in relation to home detention curfew and prisons. Those included a number of provisions covering the new offence of remaining unlawfully at large, improved powers of recall from HTC, and the duty to cooperate for public authorities in relation to early release from prison. In December 2019, commencement regulations brought into force a number of provisions in relation to disclosure, ahead of wider commencement of the substantive provisions later this year. In December 2019, we also commenced Section 44 of the Management of Offenders Act in respect to periods of appointment of the parole board chairperson and the members.
James Kelly.
It's a matter of real concern that the provisions of Part 2 in relation to spent convictions, no date has yet been set for that being implemented. A case has been drawn to my attention of an individual who was convicted and fined £400 in December 2015. Under the new law, that conviction would have been spent in 12 months and the record withdrawn from disclosure. However, the individual had a job offer withdrawn last month because the record of the conviction was still on their disclosure. I think this is unacceptable. And can I ask the Cabinet Secretary why there has been a dereliction of duty in this area, and what is the point Parliament passing laws when 6 months down the line there's been no action taken to introduce that aspect of the legislation?
Can I say, first of all, express sympathy with James Kelly's constituent and say, look, clearly James Kelly would understand that the intention of this government is to have a fairer system of disclosure, hence why we brought forward the bill, which I'm pleased was supported by Labour. I take exception to the way he's framed the question, though it's not about a dereliction of duty. Why we sometimes take time to commence provisions are because partners will take time to be ready for a variety of reasons. So for this example, when it comes to Disclosure Scotland, there is some work that has to be done in relation to Disclosure Scotland's IT systems. The work to update Disclosure Scotland's IT systems is progressing well, and we're confident this work will be completed within the next few months. Well, he shouts 6 months from a sedentary position. I say to the member, if he's ever been involved in updating IT projects, they can take some time. Well, and therefore it does take time. So we're working on the basis that the new IT systems will be up and running and ready to commence in the next few months. There's no delay, there's no dithering, there's no dereliction of duty. This is pragmatic, practical things that have to be worked through. But the policy intention is absolutely sound, and therefore I can give them absolute guarantee there would be no reason for us to want to delay. We want to see these provisions brought forward, but I would not be doing... in fact, it would be a dereliction of duty if I brought them forward when Disclosure Scotland's IT systems were not ready to cope with those changes. So I'll continue to make sure that he's kept up to date, and can I just give him a reassurance that there's no unnecessary delay in bringing forward these...
Thank you, but I'll try to get shorter answers than questions to get the other members in. Question 6, Shona Robinson.
To ask the Scottish Government how increased investment outlined in its draft budget will help support the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service.
Minister.
The Scottish Fire and Rescue Service continues to adapt to the changing risks facing Scotland's communities, and the additional £6.1 million of funding announced in the draft budget is the third year of increased Scottish Government investment to enable SFRS modernisation. And this funding will allow SFRS to have a renewed focus on prevention to keep vulnerable people safe in their homes.
Shona Robertson.
Can I thank the Minister for that answer? I understand that firefighters are being balloted on a new pay and conditions offer with the ballot closing at the end of the month. Can the Minister provide an update on these negotiations and let us know what progress has been made so far with the main representative body, the FBU?
Minister.
The Scottish Government is not part of the negotiations on firefighter paying conditions, as this is a matter between the SFRS as the employer and the FBU. SFRS made a final pay offer, which amounting to 17% for the period up to July 2022 for the expanded role in November 2019. And the FBU are currently balloting members on that offer with a closing date of the 28th of February. I've written to both the Fire Service and the FBU, making the Scottish Government position clear that additional investment in SFRS can only be supported if real progress is made on broadening the role of firefighters in Scotland, and I hope that a deal can be reached soon.
Question 7, Liam Kerr.
To ask the Scottish Government what discussions it has had with Police Scotland regarding surveillance of drug supply routes.
Cabinet Secretary.
As Chair of the Serious Organised Crime Task Force, I have regular discussions with partners, including Police Scotland, about our collective enforcement activity in disrupting the drugs trade. As you'll be aware, the nature of threats facing our communities are changing, and therefore the response to that has to change as well. For example, online offending against vulnerable people, human trafficking, other cyber-based crimes such as child sexual exploitation. The Chief Constable needs to make decisions about how best to use resources that reflect the changing nature of that threat. And the best way of protecting people in all of Scotland's communities is to ensure that overall the Chief Constable has the capacity and capability directed towards the threats that are faced by those communities. That includes the communities of Dumfries. The decision in relation to the surveillance team in Dumfries is an operational matter for the Chief Constable within that broader context.
Liam Kerr.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. From those discussions, the Cabinet Secretary will be well aware it's been reported that a vital police surveillance unit based in Dumfries and Galloway will be shut down, despite the fact the area's ports and roads reportedly make it a choke point for the supply of drugs. It's been reported that cuts to police budgets are directly responsible for these decisions, and a former member of the unit, Martin Bertram, has said removing the team from Dumfries will give organised crime gangs more scope to carry out their criminal activities. Cabinet Secretary, isn't he correct?
Cabinet Secretary.
I have to say to Liam Kerr, it is utter nonsense to suggest that resourcing reasons are behind this move. Let me say to Liam Kerr, it is being done for operational reasons, which are rightly at the independent discretion of the Chief Constable. It's quite something, Presiding Officer, that Liam Kerr and the Tories think it's appropriate for politicians to direct the operational activity of the Chief Constable. I'm certain that Liam Kerr thinks very highly of himself, but the Chief Constable, with 30 years of operational experience, has far more operational experience than Liam Kerr, or indeed any politician in this chamber, has. So let's leave the operational decisions rightly to the Chief Constable. There should be no political interference in the Chief Constable's decisions, and therefore, if Liam Kerr has particular concerns, he shouldn't be raising them. He shouldn't be demanding that the Justice Secretary intervenes in that. He should be raising them directly with the Chief Constable. And I suspect he'll take a very dim view of being told by Liam Kerr on what he should and shouldn't be doing with his capacity and his assets.
Question 8, Keith Brown.
To ask the Scottish Government how it is engaging with interested parties such as Families Need Fathers during stage 1 of the Children's Scotland Bill.
Minister.
The Scottish Government has continued to engage with stakeholders since the Children's Scotland Bill was introduced into the Scottish Parliament on the 2nd of September 2019. I've met with Shared Parenting Scotland, so they were formerly Families Need Fathers Scotland, twice since my appointment as Minister for Community Safety. Officials have met with Shared Parenting Scotland on a number of occasions since the Children's Scotland Bill has been introduced. And, for example, officials attended the relaunch of Shared Parenting Scotland on the 10th of February.
Keith Brown.
Can I thank the Minister for her answer and advise that I've been contacted not just by Families Need Fathers but quite a number of constituents regarding provisions of the bill around the issue of estranged parents and the need to maintain personal relationships and direct contact with their children. Would she be willing to meet with me to discuss those constituents' views?
Minister, briefly, if you can.
The Scottish Government believes that both parents should be fully involved in the child's upbringing as long as it's in the best interest of the child. And I would, of course, be happy to meet with Mr Brown or his constituents to discuss this matter in more detail.
Thank you. That concludes questions on justice and law officers. And a slight pause before we move on to the next item of business.